Shekhar Gupta trying to make money out of the worst humanitarian crisis possible. But no, facts and figures and data points and statistics so as to convince you, which means that pretty much no matter what happens, Modi ji is always the one at fault. Anti-national interest. Hi friends, we all know that COVID is one of the deadliest pandemics ever to hit humankind. We also know that pandemics attack in multiple waves, the second wave being the deadliest. The Spanish flu of the 1920s is an excellent case in point, which killed close to 100 million people. But funnily enough, for the anti-BJP forces, the second wave of corona hitting the whole wide world is only due to Modi ji and BJP. The poster child of anti-BJP forces, Shekhar Gupta, recently put up a video where he was joyously looking at the rising corona numbers in India and gleefully observing that the Modi government is about to unravel. His chief reasoning? Israel and China seems to have already declared themselves corona-free, it seems. It's an entirely different story altogether that in the same video itself, within the next couple of minutes, he goes on to say that nobody trusts China's numbers and Israel is a very small country, not even 1/3 the population of Kerala. Now we all know that Shekhar Gupta has labeled his video as national interest. But if I were in his editorial board, looking at his script, I would have put his auntie right in front of him and called it anti-national interest. Now you may be pardoned to think that Shekhar Gupta would put in front of you various facts and figures and data points and statistics so as to convince you about his morbid but dubious story. But no. Within the first 2 minutes of the video where he is selling India's corona deaths, you can see him sheepishly asking for money. He goes on for the next couple of minutes talking about how great his YouTube channel is and how he is in dire need of money. Talk about someone trying to make money out of the worst humanitarian crisis possible, and I think here we have a great example of one such gentleman. From there on, he goes on blabbering about how Modi ji wore a suit with his name printed on it and how a stadium was named after Modi ji and so on and so forth. And we start wondering how all these tidbits are related to the coronavirus. Then there is the Kumbh Mela and the Bengal election rallies thrown in to spruce up the proceedings, and we all know how those events have caused rampant COVID in our worst corona hit states like Maharashtra and Kerala. Now obviously it seems that we cannot depend on our auntie and uncle nationals to give us the real facts and figures and data points on the COVID situation. So let's try to do that ourselves. The international metric which allows us to judge the performance of countries in their track record in fighting COVID is by the number of deaths per million of their population. In that chart, we can see Italy right at the top with 1,950 deaths per million, closely followed by UK at 1,900, and then we have Brazil at 1,800, USA at 1,700, we have France at 1,500, Switzerland at 1,200, and Germany at 1,000. And then we have Russia at 700, and then rolls in our Shekhar Gupta's favorite Israel at 700. In this very important list, India is at the way bottom at about 1/5 of Israel's number at 132. What this means is that no matter how bad COVID is going to get from here on, India is always going to be one of the top countries that was able to fight COVID and protect its citizens much better than a lot of the countries out there. Now, if you consider the actual people who got infected by COVID and how they turned out to be, the metric that we use is the case fatality rate. And here also, we have UK topping the chart with about 2.89, and we have the global average at 2.12. US comes in at 1.8, and here also India is at a meager 1.22. What this means is that we in India are doing a much better job of protecting the lives of COVID patients than some of the most developed countries in the world who have a lot more resources at their disposal. So yes, India may be treating two patients in one bed like how Shekhar Gupta has shamelessly displayed in his video, but then again that may be the reason why we are able to save twice the number of lives as the global average. So my advice to Shekhar uncle is, before you upload random pictures and try to discredit India, try to have some good logic behind it. Now when it comes to vaccinations also, India is far ahead in the charts. If you look at the number of countries whose numbers we can trust, India is second only to the USA in terms of the number of vaccinations at 127 million. And our Shekhar Gupta's favorite Israel drops in at only 10 million doses. And this is against an India which still holds the world record for the maximum number of vaccinations in a single day at 4.5 million. And that can mean only one thing, that if Modi ji was in charge of vaccinating Israel, we would have vaccinated the entire country under 3 days flat. Now the real sad part of this whole story is that the people who are spreading Shekhar Gupta's yellow journalism on social media are people who I know to have received the vaccination rolled out by our government, and that too free of cost. Yes, they could have paid for the vaccine if they had to, but then again we know that the Indian government has rolled out this vaccine to millions of poor and disenfranchised Indians who would have never had the ability to pay for this vaccine even if their lives and livelihood depended on it. And in this particular case, it quite literally does. And that is the real matter of pride for a BJP worker like me, that India, in spite of still being a poor country at the 138th position on the per capita GDP across all countries, is still able to roll out vaccinations free of cost, not only for its own deserving citizens, but to citizens of over 150 countries all across the world. That is the Atmanirbhar Bharat we are talking about, and that is something which we can all be absolutely proud of. Now, Shekhar Gupta ends his video by saying that one of the mistakes the central government has done is to remove the market forces from our vaccination drive. But today, when our central government has changed their stance and has opened the pricing freedom of the vaccine developers, we have the same liberals crying foul and saying that they are not ready to pay for their vaccines. So I guess the Shekhar Gupta fans are playing the game of heads I win and tails you lose, which means that pretty much no matter what happens, Modi ji is always the one at fault. Now we have to agree that all the regions across India are not doing the same level of excellent job when it comes to fighting COVID. And this is especially important because public health is a state responsibility as defined by the Constitution of India, and that too at a priority 6 in a long list of 61 items. So how are our various states doing? Obviously, the political verdict coming from there is quite clear. Of our worst affected 5 states in India, only one of them is ruled by BJP. In fact, 2 of those 5 states don't even have a single BJP MLA, and the third one has just 1 MLA. So now looking at this and then coming forward to say that the corona situation in India is because of Modi ji and BJP requires a special type of stupid, and I leave it to you to judge whether our Shekhar Gupta belongs to one of those. Now before I wind up, let me also share some positive news as well. One of the upsides of the India story of fighting COVID is how we have used this crisis to build our competitiveness in various areas, especially our economy. At the peak of the first wave, when the whole world was hunkering down, our benchmark Sensex was hovering at around 29,500, with all the foreign institutional investors having bailed out, lock, stock and barrel. Quite understandably so, because they were genuinely worried whether the Indian government will be able to fight this hitherto unheard of COVID pandemic. Now today, when we look at the same benchmark index, we see that all of those foreign institutional investors have come roaring back, and we are hovering at around 50,000, up about 80% from our recent lows. When it comes to our gold reserves and our foreign exchange reserves, they have gone up so alarmingly high that USA is now threatening to designate us as currency manipulators. In the last 1 year, from March 2020, our imports have come down by 80% and our exports have gone up by 60%, thereby reducing our current account deficit from $77 billion to $12 billion. The IMF forecast says that India is going to be the only large economy that is going to have double-digit growth ahead of USA and China at 12.5%. Now, all of this notwithstanding, I'm not saying that everything is perfect with the COVID situation in India. When it comes to India, nothing is ever perfect, whichever way you look at it. So, constructive criticisms are always welcome. But at the same time, there are a lot of challenges that lie ahead of us, just like how it was 1 year back. So again, constructive suggestions are also very welcome. But then again, if you are trying to sell sweeping statements like COVID is going to destroy India and the Modi government is going to unravel, that can only be dismissed as faulty logic being window dressed as wishful thinking. If you have been following the Mood of the Nation poll done by India Today over the last year or so, we will know that Modi ji's handling of the corona crisis has only resulted in his numbers increasing day by day, and today he stands tall among the world leaders as the undisputed leader when it comes to approval rating among his people measured by independent survey organizations. The popularity of BJP is also rising, and that is only because of the selfless work our Karyakartas are doing on the ground across the country. Even if you look at the worst hit areas in Maharashtra, it is the work that is done by people like us from BJP which is shining as a beacon of hope and has been highlighted as such by some of the journalists who are not usually big fans of BJP's work, like Barkha Dutt. So I guess the bottom line is, for those people who are thriving on the high hopes of Modi government unraveling, is going to be disappointed one more time in the corona crisis case also, just like how they were disappointed in the case of CAA agitation, farmers agitation and whatnot. So I guess that is exactly how it should be, and that's why I say Jai Hind.